when you come back to like, what does heart rate variability actually mean? The best definition, the simplest definition I've ever been able to understand or articulate is it's the language of your body that's communicating with you how it's adapting to stress and strain. Your body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress, real or perceived stress, positive or negative stress, past, present, or future stress. Real, perceived, positive, negative stressors, the body doesn't know the difference. The only goal of the body is to keep you alive. And so for us, the best metric to do that and understand how your body is adapting is heart rate variability. And when we get into like the scientific components of heart rate variability, it's the higher the number, the better. The higher the number, the more positively you're adapting to stress and strain. The lower the number means, hey, this doesn't mean you're going to die, but what it means is that.
Justin, thanks so much for joining our show.
Oh, Scott, it's so good to be here as we've been just kind of chatting back and forth and communicating as we were stepping up to do this show. There's so much alignment, and I firmly believe that the people that you pour into, the people that you do life with, it's alignment before assignment. And I just see that there's so much there for us. So I'm excited to see what God has in store today.
Yeah, well, I hopped into all of your stuff, and I'm super excited. First of all, you have The Power of Ownership coming out. We've pre-ordered the book. It's coming to us as soon as it's ready. So we're going to talk about that at the end. But I'm excited about the new material that you're putting out. But gathering the data on what you've accomplished in your career, what you really are speaking so much about. I dive into the first thing and I start listening to heart rate variability. And I geek out on this stuff. I've worn a Whoop since 2019. I have so many questions, but can you just define HRV for our audience, for those that don't know what it is, and maybe your passion around the heart rate variability number?
Yeah, so heart rate variability for me was something that I got into before it was sexy. I got into before everybody was talking about it. And my journey through HRV started back in 2001. And everyone's like, 2001, like, how old are you? Like, what are you doing? Well, this is where the story takes a very hard God trajectory. When I was 12 years old, I was born in Canada, hockey player, and was playing with some athletes that were 3-4 years older than me, and was just blessed with a little bit of God-given talent. And my dad looked at me and he put his hand on my lap and he said, "Son, talent will get you noticed, but consistency will get you paid." And it was at that moment that something flipped in my mind. I was like, instead of how do I be the best, it was like, okay, how do I become the most consistent version of myself, which will make me different, which will make me stand out, which will ultimately end up cumulatively over time leading to the success that I'm desiring. And so that concept at 12 years old really shaped a lot of things for me. And so at 13, I was reading medical journals. I was studying everything about the body, about sleep, about all of these different things. And I still remember I was signed up for the National Strength and Conditioning Association's quarterly periodicals and peer-reviewed journals. I was signed up for the American Association of Sports Medicine journals. And so these would come and I'd get them in the mail. I'd be like, oh yes, I'm going deep. And so at 13 years old, this is what I dove into. And in 2001, there was an article that talked about the power of heart rate variability to understand recovery. And I was like, interesting. What is this heart rate variability thing? And so I'd never seen it before. Everything that had been published up until that point was all about heart rate. And I dove in and I read it and it made so much sense to me. Like it clicked for the first time. It's like, oh, a number can help us understand how my body's adapting to stress and strain. That must be important. How do you measure it? Well, all of a sudden I went to my father and I said, hey, for Christmas, can I get a heart rate monitor? And he goes, why? Are you sick? Like, what's wrong? Like, remember, this is 2001. And so he's like, "Are you sick?" I was like, "No, no, no. I want to understand how my body's recovering, and I want to be able to understand like how I'm sleeping and what my resting heart rate is, and then when I'm training to be able to look at different variability constraints and how this can operate in a very purposeful way." He's like, "Well, let's see what it is." At this point, like heart rate monitors, to be honest, were still like 12, $1,300. Like they were not cheap. Like today, you can get them for like $40. And he goes, "I'm gonna have to talk to your mom." And so I was like, "I don't care, just pool grandma and grandpa's money, pool your guys' money, pool aunt and uncle's, pool Christmas, birthday, and any other thing, and just get it." And so anyways, that's what happened. And so since 2001, I've been measuring heart rate variability. I started doing it all manually, all through the equation and grabbing data and condensing it. And it ended up being the trajectory of my life, getting ultimately into my postgraduate doctoral research in heart rate variability and sleep, and then taking that on to the National Hockey League and what we empower people with today is allowing data to drive direction and data to determine decisions. And so when you come back to like, what does heart rate variability actually mean? The best definition, the simplest definition I've ever been able to understand or articulate is it's the language of your body that's communicating with you how it's adapting to stress and strain. Realizing that stress, your body doesn't know the difference between mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress, real or perceived stress, positive or negative stress, past, present, or future stress. So let me dive into that for a second. You could just finish a hard workout. You could be running a marathon. You could be in a fight with your spouse. You could be dropping your kids off at college. You could be battling with what your purpose is or what you want to do with your business. You could be not sleeping well. All those mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stresses, the body doesn't know the difference. I could all of a sudden jump into your office, Scott, and frighten you, and you could be like, "Oh my gosh," or I could simply have, or somebody could come up with a gun and point it in your face, both real and other just perceived stress. We could have a positive stress, meaning you've got family coming in for the holidays, you've got a new renovation of your home, you're buying a new home, you've got a new baby coming into the world, or you could be going to jail, you could be getting sick, you could be looking after a sick family member. Real, perceived, positive, negative stressors. The body doesn't know the difference. The only goal of the body is to keep you alive. Basically, to say, hey, epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, cortisol, we need to spike to protect Scott in each one of these situations. And so, what we start to realize is that there's so many times in our life that if we actually take a look back, stress is not what we think about, like the pull your hair out stress, the like, I'm like, I feel physically stressed. Our body is constantly adapting to stress. And so what we have to realize is that that chronic stress and being unaware of how much we're actually placing on our bodies, what that does is it creates this irregularity or lack of rhythm. I don't like the word balance, but lack of rhythm between stress and regeneration that throws us into this burnout space instead of allowing us to operate in what I call ownership. And so for us, the best metric to do that and understand how your body is adapting is heart rate variability. And when we get into like the scientific components of heart rate variability, it's the higher the number, the better. The higher the number, the more positively you're adapting to stress and strain, meaning you have a greater capacity to take on more. The lower the number means, hey, this doesn't mean you're going to die, but what it means is that, hey, it's an alert saying your body's not adapting to stress and strain very well, and you have a lesser capacity to take it on. And we can get into how it's measured and how we calculate it and all those things, a little bit more scientific, but at its core, that's what it is. It's the language to help understand how your body's adapting to stress and strain. The higher the number, the better. The lower the number, it's an alert saying, hey, we're not adapting as well. It's an extremely personalized number. It's an extremely individual number. You can't compare yours to somebody else's. You want to compare it to the trend of where you've been. And it gives you a lot of insights as to how you can change habits, behaviors, and lifestyles.
Yeah, and why I geek out about this, just for everybody listening, is in there have been moments in life where you have these epiphanies, and whether you're 12 to 14 and you're creating a pathway that creates your future, or you're like I am, and COVID hits, and I realized I had nowhere to be, nowhere to rush to, nothing that I had to run a business, I had to figure out how to keep it going, I had to do all these things, but I learned to slow down in a way I had never slowed down before. I also had started wearing the Whoop, so I was tracking things I had never tracked, including heart
Yeah.
rate variability. And part of the reason it was so interesting listening to your research and a lot of the conversations you have, especially with athletes, both young and high performers at every level, high performers tend to run hot. So,
Mm,
the problem is we keep adding more and more and more, and we think that the more we add, the better we're going to produce. And the reality is, it's when you start looking at heart rate variability, it tends to be a recipe for disaster. And so here's what I mean. My heart rate variability in my Whoop, I have changed so many habits. I have changed. So this will tie everything in that Justin's talking about for everybody listening. I have changed so many things. I mean, sleep has increased. I had no idea how negatively um, I was being impacted by the lack of sleep. I was always one of those, hey, 5, 6 hours, I'm good. And the older I was getting, the worse it was getting. So my heart rate variability is around 28 to 34 on a good day. I hit 38 the other day and I was like, whoo, man, I am crushing it. I don't even know what I did differently. I went to bed at the same time. I'm trying, but there's still so many things I'm learning. And I think part of the reason I bring this up is I've always had an objective, especially in the last couple of years, to help elevate the HRV because I know it's directly impacting my ability to function in the world at the highest level that I possibly can. But it's interesting to me because I'm a father and I want to teach my sons how to do better than me. I want to teach our family members, our friends, all these things. So when I'm listening to your messaging, I'm thinking of my 14-year-old son playing at an academy in soccer who lives away from us, who is same level of obsession that you're discussing, maybe not in the level of reading the sports journals, but just in the sport in general and trying to get to another level at all, consistency being the key. And I look at all that stuff and I started reading it and listening to your messaging. And I was like, so many cool things to talk about today. So this is not only a great message for everybody, but something I've found very personal. And my neighbor and I have talked about heart rate variability. My buddies and I have talked about it. We all share the Whoop, and theirs is way better than mine on a regular basis, like and a higher starting baseline number. So I'll
yep.
pause there. I'll let you input. I know you have stuff to say, but I just wanted to kind of throw that out. That's why it was so interesting to me because it's something that when you look at the four quadrants of how I do the high performance life, love, impact, faith, and energy, part of what helped me get more less imbalanced was identifying areas that I was not providing the correct time and energy to and adapting. But it was also identifying that I'm a sprinter. And when
Yep.
you're a sprinter and everything you do is at 150%, you have to actually position your body. And you go over 8 things that every athlete can do. I mean, I want to talk about all this stuff because it's so cool and so pertinent.
Yeah. So I'll kind of dive in a little bit here. So what you said at the very beginning is really crucial for a lot of people, I think, to understand. Is a lot of people have been making decisions based off of their emotions, their circumstances, their feelings, and opinions. And a lot of us have no idea how good we could actually feel if we started to make our decisions off of data. And we run our businesses off data. We run our financial portfolios off data. We might make our marketing decisions off data. We make our real estate decisions off data. But yet, the one thing that is irreplaceable in this world, we just run blindly. And it doesn't make sense to me. And the crazy part, if we were to, and Scott, you can answer this question, is how good do you feel today versus versus how you thought you felt back in 2019, 2020?
Probably 100 times better. I mean, we're not even talking about 10x. We're talking about
Yeah.
100x, and I'm still not to where I want to be. But the
Yep.
key is I'm recognizing it, I'm aware, and the accountability it
Yeah.
provides is so valuable to build on.
Totally. And that's where we've been really focused. Like the mission of our business, the mission of Own It, is to redeem the health of the world through educating, empowering, and equipping people to take ownership of their health in a personalized way. It's not based off Justin's opinions. It's not just based off Justin's philosophy. It's not based off of the Own It system or the Own It method. It's based off of your data. And we empower you in that way. Now, here's why this matters so much. Because if you go back to 2014, we peaked in our average lifespan of both men and women, topping out at 79.4. 79.4 was the longest average lifespan of both men and women in North America. And since then, over the course of the last decade, we've seen a steady decline and a steady decrease at different rates of both the average lifespan of both men and women. Today, the average lifespan of a man is 72.7, and the average lifespan of a female is 77.2. And so you see this steady decline and this steady decrease. The number one cause of death in the United States is chronic illness. 71%, the leading cause of death in the United States. 95% of those deaths are preventable through habit, behavior, and lifestyle change. And when I think about this and I sit back on this, I go, there's more experts, there's more knowledge, there's more wisdom, there's more courses, there's more conferences, there's more events, there's more of everything, products available today than ever before. But yet we're still sicker than ever before. And it's not that we need more wisdom. It's not that we need more knowledge. It's not that we need more opinions. It's not that we need more of anything. We need to make sure that we can synthesize the information down and make it personal to you and personal to me, because the season of life that I'm in is different than yours, Scott. The priorities that I have are different than yours, Scott. The things that my body has gone through and that I ask of it on a day-to-day basis are different than yours, Scott. And that's the same for every single person listening to this. So why would I tell you what I do and then make you have to try to replicate that? Because people live in one of four places. They're either guessing what I need to do, and I'm just randomly taking things and I'm doing them. Two, they copy. So they copy what somebody else is doing, the influencer, the author, the role model. Or three, they simply comply. They comply with what their friend tells them. They comply with what their coach tells them off of their system. They comply with what their doctor tells them. They comply with what their naturopath tells them based off of, again, just a system that they have, a PDF, a protocol. Well, none of those things are personalized to you. So the only way that I say that we should operate is off customization. Not guessing, not copying, not complying, but customizing. And when you customize and you make decisions based off of data, that's the moment that it becomes personal to you. That's the moment you have evidence. That's the moment it becomes sustainable. That's the moment you get buy-in. That's the moment that you go from knowing what to do to understanding what to do, because you understand your body for the very first time. And that's our goal. That's our mission. And so in alignment with that, as we educate, empower, and equip people with the information necessary, the wisdom necessary, we want to take that leading cause of death in the United States from 71% to less than 50% by the year 2030. And that is our goal. That is our mission. That's what we wake up to do every single day, so that we can ultimately help people change their life, not based off of something that I've come up with, but rather what their body needs, and getting super personal with data so that we can ultimately help change the world.
Yeah, it's great. It's so funny because I think I have tons of conversations about health with people, and one of the things I learned about myself was mentally I had figured out how to make myself feel like I was handling stress.
Yeah.
Mentally, I had convinced myself that no matter what, I was good. I mean, you could put me in a fire, I could walk
Yeah.
over coals, I could do anything that you throw at me, I got it. And what I didn't have was the body inside out is screaming for
Yeah.
attention and help. And so when you start to actually take ownership, which is your entire mantra, the Own It app, all the things you talk about, it's your personal journey. And
Yeah.
I think that it's hard because people are always looking for that answer from somebody else, but it's really personal. You've got to figure out, hey, what bedtime works for me? what diet works for me. There is no perfect diet, but there are things that you can replicate and habits that help. Talk about that for a second, because I've got two sons. One's going to play Division I soccer next year in college. The other's playing for a Major League Soccer academy, and at the highest level, he's captain on his team. He's looking to build and hit a pro level. And as a father, I try to position them with all the right things. And one of the things I heard you mention in one of the podcasts I listened to in preparation was, hey, and I do sauna, I do cold plunge, I do everything that I can think of because I like it. But if you're not paying attention to the internal markers, then we're not paying attention to everything else. And I'm just interested, what are some of the things, if you're a parent listening to this or you're looking to make changes in your life, what are some of these simple habits that people can do, Justin, that will guide them towards a higher level HRV, or at least ownership of their own body?
Yeah, I'm going to put a bookmark in that and come back to it because I want to tell my story so
Okay.
that people can understand why that matters and why I'm passionate about it. And it touches on what you spoke about in terms of your mentality of I'm good, I can keep going, I can keep pushing. So in 2018, over the course, this is now I've had a 10-year career in the NCAA and the NHL as a health and performance director, managing the health, wellness, and performance of the best athletes in the world. And I had that same mentality. I was pushing, I was grinding, I was up late at night, I was looking at all the data, I was at games until 10 p.m. I was then staying up until 1 or 2, looking at the data, looking it back over video, waking up at 7 a.m. to ultimately get back to the rink, be the first one there, traveling over 100 days a year, uh, pushing in a massive way. At the same time, and people have to realize this, I wasn't just this guy that was this nerd in the corner. I was working out heavily. I was running triathlons. I was running marathons. I was winning world championships in the DECA and the High Rocks games and competing at a high level. I had all the muscles. I looked fit as you could ever imagine. And in 2019, for the first time in my life, I was like, something's not right. I had brain fog like I couldn't imagine. I had body aches that were showing up that weren't normal. I was having a trouble sleeping. Anytime I was eating, I'd get this indigestion and bloating feeling. And I started to go to all the doctors. And the doctors would run blood work and they say, "Oh, you're the picture of health. We want all of our people to look like you." Other doctors would say, "Oh, Justin, you just turned 32. It's normal. It's normal. You're in your 30s, man. Like that's normal." Um, Justin, look at what you're doing. Look at what you're asking your body to do. Look at how you're training. That's normal. Like expect that. But I wouldn't accept that. So I then went to naturopaths. I then went to the functional medicine docs. They did all their fancy tests, thousands of dollars, gave me their protocols, gave me their supplement routines, thousands of more dollars. Didn't feel any better. Then I was in Chicago and I picked up a medicine ball after preparing our guys, and I turned, and the last thing I remember was the room spinning. I fell, and the next thing I remember is seeing the top of a room laying on a bed, and I'm like, man, I got to figure this out because this is not okay. I went and got a colonoscopy and an endoscopy. They found 4 polyps the size of my thumb in my colon, all precancerous, and they found an ulcer in my stomach, the size of a quarter, also precancerous. And that was the moment that I knew I had to change something because how I was looking on the outside was not living up to how my health truly was on the inside. And the doctor said to me, he goes, "Justin, I'm sorry we didn't find this, but if we hadn't done this, you wouldn't have seen your 35th birthday. It would have gotten that critical that quickly. And 3 years later, I would not have been here." And so that's why this matters to me, is making sure that we can look on the inside out. And that is what true ownership of your health looks like. And so for me, I say we need to do 3 things. 3 things in taking an ownership picture. Number 1, we need to understand what our biometric data is. Biometric data I put into 3-prong approach. Number 1, we need to know heart rate variability. Number 2, we need to know sleep quality. Number 3, we need to know VO2 max. Those are the 3 numbers that we need to be aware of. Heart rate variability, stress and strain, understanding this component. Number 2, sleep quality, knowing the difference between light sleep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep, and awake cycle. We want to be at 40 to 50% of our sleep quality in REM and slow wave. And then VO2 max, again, if you can get that done through, um, we do it with all of our clients, but again, if you can get it done somewhere through a mask and get it done twice, 3 times a year, amazing. If not, take your max heart rate, divide it by your resting heart rate, and multiply it by 15.3. If you as a man are not above 48, or you as a female are not above 35, um, major issues. Like, we need to be over those numbers. And so that's bucket one, biometric data. Number two, cellular deficiencies. I need to understand what you're deficient in. Cellular testing. Now, there's a difference between normal blood testing that you get done at your doctor's, you get done at your 10x Health and uh, Get Blokes and Inside Tracker, all these ones that are like, oh, do our blood testing, do our blood testing. That's blood testing that's looking for what's broken. And that's quite often what's wrong with our medical system, is that's only looking for what's broken. It's not looking at how do we actually prevent and be proactive in these ways. And so normal blood testing will show you what's in the serum, but what's in the serum is not available to the cell. So you can have high levels of vitamin D, high levels of vitamin K, high levels of vitamin E, high levels of vitamin A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down. But it doesn't mean that is getting into the cell. It doesn't mean it's available for the cell to use. So cellular testing looks at what is in the cell. And if you're interested in that, ownittesting.com is where you can get that and lean into that. But once you get your cellular testing, that's when you can truly customize supplementation and you can truly personalize nutrition. Up until that point, you're just guessing, or you're just copying, or you're just complying. You're not customizing. So that's number two, is cellular deficiencies, understanding that. And then bucket three, Scott, comes back to what you just spoke about, is what I call, or we call, a life by design. Basically meaning designing your habit structures around what heart rate variability is telling you. Deciding based upon your priorities, based on your values, based on the season of life you're in, and then determining what you continue or what you change um, based upon heart rate variability. And we break those into 4 buckets. We've got fuel, which consists of nutrition and hydration. We've got build, which consists of training and mindset. We've got renew, which consists of self-care and environment, and repair, which consists of sleep and immune response. So those 4 pillars, or 8 foundational principles, are all levers that you can start to pull to make sure you're giving yourself more capacity to increase heart rate variability, to increase VO2 max, to increase sleep quality, and to minimize cellular deficiency. If you look at those things in this area and drive them based on habit and behavior changes, if the data doesn't change, if the data doesn't move, you're not doing the right things. It's not on year 3 that your multivitamin starts to work. It's not on it's not your 100th sauna that you start to see an increase in HRV. It's not on your 50th cold plunge that you start to see an increase in sleep quality. It's not on your 900th workout that you start to see an increase in VO2 max. You should be seeing this incrementally, and incremental improvements in all of these, if what you're doing habitually is actually working and designed for you. And so that's how we structure this. That's how we do things. That's how we work with people, so that we run the decision-making process, develop the programs, develop the processes, develop the systems for you, extremely unique, N of 1 solutions, so that data drives decisions, not opinions, feelings, and behaviors.
Yeah, it's great. And it's so well needed, and the process sounds phenomenal. At the end of the day, what you're doing is you're taking what a lot of people have been utilizing for athletes in general and
Yeah.
applying it to the average human who's not getting any level of data or feedback to understand what's right. When you just go ahead.
I was just going to say, Scott, what ends up happening too, and you find this in our society, you find it in this industry, this health and performance, this health and wellness industry, so often, is people get really excited about like shiny objects or gimmicks, and you see it all the time. Some people go, "Oh, we're now going to be measuring VO2 max," and they'll measure VO2 max once, and then they'll program on it and allow it just to continue for the rest of eternity. Well, that's not a system. They'll go and they'll measure HRV for a month and be like, oh, that was cool. And then they'll put it away. The thing is being able to have a system or a process that makes it sustainable and something that's approachable and easy for you. You've got Peter Attia, who's a huge, I love Peter's stuff, really deep, really sound in science and the way it's backed. But the thing that Peter does that I'd love him to take the next step with is he talks so heavily on VO2 max and how important it is, and how the higher your VO2 max number, the further you are away from death, all these things. But nobody knows, okay, what do I do with this now? Like, how do I use it? How do I implement it? What does this look like? And realizing that all of these other pieces are so critical and so important. And so Harvard came out with a study probably 3.5, 4 years ago. And the way in which you can actually increase the average lifespan of an individual by approximately 15 years is by looking at a higher average HRV, a higher average sleep quality, a higher VO2 max, a low number or low level of cellular deficiency, and a steady blood glucose. Those 5 things will increase your lifespan by about 15 years. And so all of a sudden, when I think about this and validating again what it is that we're doing, looking at HRV, sleep quality, cellular deficiencies, VO2 max, and then having habits that are driving back to these and determining, hey, do I need to change something? Do I need to adjust something? Do I need to do something differently so that we can all of a sudden realize something different? I don't know the answer unless I see your data. Otherwise, I'm guessing. Otherwise, I'm just saying what worked for me or worked for somebody else. But this is the way that we change it. And that is the biggest thing that I want people to do, is I want to empower them to understand it themselves. Scott, you just said at the beginning of the show, as I went through this journey, I started to learn what habits really worked for me because I had data to drive. Oh, when I had alcohol at night, my HRV plummeted and my sleep quality wasn't as good. Even one glass of wine. Man, I didn't realize that that was actually happening. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't hungover the next day. I wasn't any of these things. But I didn't realize that it impacted my HRV and my sleep quality that badly. Eating a late meal at night. Man, I didn't realize that that plummeted my HRV so
The
heavily.
worst.
And
The
and
worst.
yeah,
That is not for me. Number one worst thing is a late meal. Go to a conference.
yep.
You even it's not even a hard day. It's all
Oh,
learning. It's relaxing. You have a late dinner. HRV gets it's like punching you in the gut. Sleep
yeah.
declines. And then even the alcohol, to your point, even the type of alcohol. I know the difference
Mhm.
between white wine, red wine, bourbon. I
Yep.
could tell you how each of them affect me and impact me in a different
Yep.
way. And then to your point, another thing that we hear a lot of, if you stop eating within 3 hours before sleep, and that also applies to drinking alcohol. What do you normally do when you're drinking alcohol? You're drinking it until you go to sleep. You're snacking. You're doing all the things that you shouldn't be doing, and all these habits become. It's sort of like the lifestyle habit. When someone starts working out, it's not just the workout that's helping them become better if they're doing it every day. It's the fact that when they go to sleep, they're hydrating more. When they go to sleep, they're going to bed earlier. They're not drinking alcohol during the week now because they have a workout the next morning. Like, these are changes that start to catapult you towards a healthier life that you don't
Yep.
recognize until you start taking action.
And there's a big the big thing that we've done too is we've taken behavioral science and neuroscience and started to include it. There's a lot of studies that come out, one specifically back in 2015, I believe. And what they showed was that when you have data to back up and validate daily, that's the important thing. Validate daily based off of the habits and behaviors that you've been doing, the likelihood of consistency and the likelihood of sustainability increases. Because it's one thing to go and say, oh, I'm going to go to sleep a little bit earlier this week. Well, guess what? You go to sleep a little bit earlier this week, you're still going to be tired. Like, you don't go to bed for early for a week and then all of a sudden go, man, I've got more energy than ever before and I feel amazing. You go to the gym for 2 weeks. Well, guess what? You're still out of shape. You go and you start eating better. Well, guess what? You're still overweight. You go and you start meditating. Well, guess what? You still have anxiety. You go and you start doing breath work. Well, you still have brain fog. it's not immediate that you see the changes in these things. And so the way in which we continue to develop these habits, and the ones that are going to really move the needle for you, we need to attach to some level of data that you're going to see changes in, that continue to encourage you, that continue to help you, that continue to show you, hey, this is really great. I'm going to give you a story. We just did so we've got people that come through our emergence program. Emergence program is 3 months long. What we do is we get them tested at the beginning, doing their cellular testing. We build them out like their personalized supplementation and their personalized nutrition protocols. We get them all a wearable device. They all get their Whoop bands. And then we take them on a 3-month journey and start to utilize certain behavior changes based around their life that is personalized to them, the season of life they're in, what their main focus is. And we continually come back to these changes. Well, what we saw was there was an individual who had done all the testing and this happens thousands of times. We've seen it thousands of times. They've done all their testing. They've had their wearable before. And quite frankly, they took their wearable off because they're like, it tells me every morning that I haven't slept well, tells me that I've got a low HRV. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I might as well just leave it on the shelf. I know I didn't sleep well. What do you want me to do? And when all of a sudden they came through 2.5 weeks later, the individual's HRV had gone from 17 to 37. And it was a change of two things in his life. Two things. He owns 7 chiropractic clinics, and so he's got a lot of stress in his life. We did, and again, the guy was working out. The guy was doing all the right things. He would sauna at night. We did 2 things. Number one, we had him take remember, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress. The body doesn't know the difference. We had him take a 15-minute break twice a day to do a 5-minute meditation and a 10-minute journal. Once at noon and once right before he went home, to clear his mind and give him space. Sometimes he does breath work right into the journal. Sometimes he does meditation right into the journal, just something he chose. And second was stopped with the alcohol at dinner. He would have a glass of wine every night at dinner before he would go to bed. He stopped those two things, and in 2.5 weeks doubled his HRV. Well, all of a sudden he goes, it might just be a coincidence. And so we're like, free reign, skip it for a day, have your wine at night. 34 to 12. He goes, oh my gosh, I do not believe this, but this makes total sense to me. When I do the things, it increases. When I don't, it decreases. When I do the things, my sleep quality increases. When I don't, it decreases. Now, to be honest, if I'm actually reflecting and being aware of what's happening, when I do these things, I am more mentally clear. I am more relaxed. I am a better husband. I can love better. I can feel more fulfilled. I do have more mental clarity. I do have more capacity. And when I don't, I am more tense. I am more frustrated. I am more irritated. I am more anxious. And so that was like oh my God, give me more. Like, give me more. I need more. I need to keep going because I don't know, like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, imagine how far I could go. And so we see that story over and over and over and over again because people don't know what they're capable of, and they don't know what a life lived differently feels like. Their conception and their perception of normal is distorted because they've lived in dysfunction for so long. They've operated in this dysfunctional state, this space of chronic stress, this state of chronic cellular deficiency, this state of chronic fight or flight. And I say the cycle literally becomes chronic stress, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, real, perceived, positive, negative, past, future, present. Your body doesn't know the difference. So chronic stress creates chronic deficiency because remember, our bodies have to adapt. They want to keep us alive. So they're just going to pull from whatever they can. So chronic stress creates chronic deficiency, creates chronic symptoms like brain fog, chronic symptoms like weight gain, chronic symptoms like headache, nausea, inability to sleep, energy loss, low libido, you name it, that we consider normal. Oh, that's normal. You're an entrepreneur. That's normal for entrepreneurs. Oh, that's normal for dads, for fathers, for mothers, for being in a marriage, for being 40, for being 50. which are lies. And the longer we stay with these chronic symptoms become chronic illness. And that is how that is becoming the leading cause of death. So for us, we want to pattern interrupt at the top. If we can pattern interrupt at the top, how to get you out of chronic stress, and then also understand where your chronic deficiencies lie and start reversing those, we eliminate number one, we eliminate number two, magically symptoms disappear. And everything you thought was normal and everything you thought you had to live with is now a completely new version of that. And that is what living differently actually looks like.
Yeah, that's powerful. Super powerful. It's interesting because there are lots of things that I've implemented in my life, and several of them, the result that I get from it are actually different from what I would in thinking it would be. So I'll give you an
Give me an
example.
example of that.
Yeah,
I'd love to
I'll
lock
give you an
in.
example. That's a great question. The sauna. So I use the infrared sauna every morning. What I started to do when I got in the sauna, it has a television screen. It's got internet in there. Like, it's got every two speakers. Um, it's quiet. I put it in my garage. I have the cold plunge outside, and I started getting in every morning. And I just did readings and spiritual time, prayer, quiet time. And so what's interesting is I love the sauna more for the space that I've created in my life
Yeah.
to chill. And so I leverage and utilize it as a way to start my day slower. So I'm not sprinting out of the gate, but the sauna may have benefits for my body, but the
Yep.
real benefit is the fact that I am in a meditative state, that I am relaxed, that I am in quiet. I'm not, my phone is not on. I am not taking messages. I'm not answering messages. I'm not looking at notifications. It is a separation. Um, Another thing that I do is I take a nap a lot of days. Excuse me. I take a nap a lot of days. Just years ago, I read a Men's Health article that said 20 to 25 minutes a day could increase productivity by X amount of time. And I was like, well, I need more productivity. So I'm going to start taking a nap. Well, I couldn't take a nap. So I was never a napper. Like, I couldn't nap as a kid. You can't start this engine and then slow it down in the middle of the day. Like, it was impossible. And so I said, it needs to be possible. And I started by we're talking probably 15 years ago. I started by laying down and just setting a timer, turning off the phone, airplane mode, 25 minutes a day. What I was doing was kind of setting up a meditative state again in the middle of the day, changing the way that I think about how I function. And so the result became much more clarity. It wasn't just the nap. Yes, part of the reason I started, I was playing in a men's soccer league with mostly Spanish guys who got off of work at like 10 o'clock. And so we started games like 11:30. Like, it was so late and I was not functioning well. And but the result was so much greater, something that I
Yeah.
still do today, not every day, but as needed. And it adapts me to kind of reshuffle the day when I'm feeling like I'm losing it.
So good. Scott, I'm going to touch on three things here. So number one, validating what you were talking about with the sauna. I'll give a data driven example to this. So I was the same way. Everyone's going to be like, "Oh, sauna and cold plunging is like the biohacking thing that I need to do that's going to increase the HRV and increase my capacity and all these things because there's so much data on it." Well, same as you, I was using the sauna space. I've got a beautiful big barrel sauna outside. I love it. Crank it to 200 and let's go. Would use that space. It's quiet, it's dark. And I would go in there and I would do breath work. I would go in there and I would read the Bible and I would pray. And that was like 20 minutes of like great time. Well, what happened was I started to see that increase in HRV. I started to see the increase in sleep quality. I'd use the cold plunge alongside it. It'd be like my time to center it before I went into my workday. And I'd often do it again at night. What I started to do though was I started to bring friends over because I was like, I love this. This is amazing. And they wanted to get in on it. Well, now I'm not praying, I'm not in the word, and my quiet time is now gone because we're conversing in there and it's fun and it's these things. The difference, hold on to this. Everyone needs to hear this. The difference was I had a 22% increase in HRV. My average HRV is like 108. And when I started bringing people into the sphere, when I started to make it about just the modality and just the thing, it dropped 19%. So I wasn't even getting the purpose or the benefit of what it was actually supposed to be, because for me, it was the modality of silence. It was the modality of relaxation, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional stress. The body doesn't know the difference. And so it wasn't that I needed more stress of the heat and the toxicity release and the cold exposure and all the things that happen in there. It wasn't that that's what I needed. It was the space that I was creating that allowed me to come back to that. Now, I would not have known this had I not been data driven. I would have made it because, quite frankly, I love sauning and cold plunging with people. I love it a lot more than doing it myself.
Yeah.
But when we think about this and we start going into this, doing it this way, what ends up happening is it ends up in a much more difficult position. So it was the space it was creating that was allowing me to get into the benefits that I was realizing. And it goes into the second point that you were making, where all of a sudden in our world, we see the change as a physical thing, the physical habit. It's the meditation, it's the breath work, it's the workout, it's the journaling. It's the thing that's there, but we don't realize that just doing the action is not what's there. Because when we just think about the action, we take a worldly approach to something that is physical, which creates an emotional disruption going, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not far enough along. I've got anxiety. I've got fear of doing these things, which then creates mental separation going, I'm not far enough along. I'll never figure this out. I'm not worth doing this anymore, which separates us spiritually from what we're called to do. But when we flip that on its head and we suddenly go, hey, what is God calling me to do? What do I need to connect to? This purpose, this intention of why I'm doing it. It creates this mental stability going, I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm doing exactly what I need to do. I'm doing this not for me, but ultimately for what I'm serving other people with, which creates emotional connection that allows us to be stable going, I'm no longer fearful. I'm confident. I'm no longer anxious. I'm um, uh, I'm I'm content. And then we determine what habit that actually becomes. So, for example, for me, meditation is not my jam. Like everybody can say, meditate, meditate, meditate. It's just not my jam. I just don't like it. It's not that, oh, Justin, you need to learn how to meditate. No, I just don't like it. I thoroughly don't enjoy it. And I've tried, I've gotten into it. I've done the habit building for 2 months in a row. I just did not like it. Breath work, I get so deep, I get so relaxed, I get so parasympathetic, and I have all of a sudden these conversations with God that would never have happened if I just meditated. And so it's this purposeful intentionality of understanding what habits actually matter by flipping them on their head and having a very purposeful intention of coming into like, why am I starting into something? And then having the data to validate it and back it up. Because once we have that, it completely changes the game for us. The last example I'll give is everyone talks about, oh, you just got to work out and be active, and that's how you're going to increase your overall health and how you're feeling. Yes and no. For a long time, again, remember competing in high rocks, competing in CrossFit, competing in triathlons and marathons. I'm kind of across the spectrum. I'm doing a lot of different things. But what I notice was when I'm not doing my long runs once a week, 6 to 10 miles is kind of what I consider a long run for me. 6 to 10 miles, when I'm not doing those, my HRV starts to drop. No matter if I'm doing my high intensity training, no matter if I'm weightlifting every day, no matter if I'm doing my swims, no matter what, but I have to get that long run in order to maintain
Good.
my
It's
HRV
good. It's
level.
good stress. You have to
It's
have good
positive. It's
stress, and you
positive
have to
stress.
identify the positive stress from the negative stress in your life. And all you're doing is auditing data driven stress. What's hurting you? What's
Yep.
helping you? And you would think, oh, I'm pushing myself too hard. I'm doing 6 miles a day. And I know it's easy because I've been doing it for so long, but I'm going to take a break for a couple days. And you watch your heart rate variability go down. You're actually doing the opposite of what your intention was.
And so there's this idea of, okay, how do we actually start creating this rhythm? And people are going to go here and go, oh, I guess Justin said I need to start doing one long run a week. No, that's not what I said. What you need to do is you need to ultimately get your data. You need to understand where your VO2 max number is. You need to understand where your HRV is, and you need to start adding in combination of strength training, long distance training, and interval training and see where your proper rhythm is. What is appropriate to get the outcomes that you desire? And no, it's not what's going to help you lose weight the most. All of those things will help you lose weight at the end of the day. But what is going to be the best for you based on what your body needs, based on the time of year you're in, based on the season of life you're in, based on the priority set that you have? And that's how you start building this really effectively. And it can be very confusing for people, which is why Own It exists, which is why what we do exists, so that we can help empower, equip, and ultimately educate people to take ownership of their health, so they're not reliant on a person, place, or thing. They're not even reliant on us forever. It's that they can truly take ownership and rely on themselves because they have a newfound understanding, not knowledge, not knowing, understanding of what their body needs, and can do it in a very personalized way anytime.
What's the process? What does it look like for somebody to get started if they wanted to work with your team, work with Own It, understand the 3 months of building these things up, and then where would they find information to be able to identify cost, investment of time, that type of stuff for the busy people that are listening to this? I know people are interested in it, and I know they want to ask that question.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that. So what ends up happening, I'll kind of walk you through what it looks like in an engagement. When you come in, you're going to get your cellular testing. You're going to get your wearable device. We're going to get your coaching set up. And so what that coaching looks like is you're going to be either one-on-one or in a small group cohort. And you're going to be actually personalizing the approach that we just talked about. So you'll have your wearable, you'll have your cellular deficiencies, and your coach will start to create this blueprint for you. And as we start to see these changes, they are then communicating, talking with you, helping you shift them, helping you change them. And over 3 months, you now have this new found approach. And so it's very hands-on, it's very educating, it's very educational, and you can move forward in a really powerful way. So you can go in that in that entire section, or you can just say, hey, you know what? I got my wearable and I just want to know my cellular testing data, and you can just sign up for cellular testing. Like I said, ownitcoaching.com is where you can go for the entire program, figure out if it's right for you, book a call with our team there, be able to kind of go through all that. So ownitcoaching.com, or if you just want the testing, ownittesting.com is a simple place you can go simply to get that and get started, and lean in.
Justin, you're doing a ton of work with the NCAA, with several huge power conference teams, and helping different programs develop strength training. As I was listening to one of your podcasts, I was thinking just about the academies in Major League Soccer and how the kids are all doing different things for the most part, and how challenging that must be from leading a team, or coaching a team and developing them at that high level, but then having some kids not hydrated enough, some kids never eating fruit, some kids not getting any greens at all, some kids not having an idea of even their baseline. I mean, how valuable do you think the wearable is for younger athletes to start to identify this and build habits around where they are? I would imagine that if, and this is, I'll finalize this question, and we'll wrap up after this, but I would imagine 15-year-old Scott, me, if I wore the same wearable I'm wearing now, my baseline HRV probably was similar, if not worse, meaning that I've always been this way. Now, how to actually develop and build from there has been something that I didn't have to wait till 40 to figure out. And now I'm 45, so it's a little bit further, but I figured it out earlier.
Yes, it's a great question. So the whenever we're working with teams, like we've got four divisions of our company. We've got that corporate athlete, that one-on-one person, basically you and I, that we're really pouring into. That's the mass majority of our business. We've then got our corporate engagements where we're going and working with teams, companies, leadership programs. So we're literally in 25 different companies around the US doing this with their entire employee leadership and staff team. And then we've got an athletics arm of our business where we're working with pro teams, we're working with collegiate teams, we're working with elite academies and private schools in helping educate the players on how they can take ownership of their health. So literally giving them this component, because wearable devices are great. But just like the example I gave you of that client before, you've got a wearable device and it doesn't make sense. You're not versed in it. You don't know what the data is actually saying or what it actually means. And when you don't know what it means or actually what it's saying, the likelihood that you're going to stick with it, the likelihood that you're going to be consistent with it just goes right down the tubes, because you're like, hey, I'm doing this, but I don't get it. The way that I can like kind of give an analogy to it is that was exactly with me with investing and financial investments. Like people are like, oh, well, just look at the market. Well, I see the numbers. I see it goes up. I see it goes down. I see this. It says buy low, sell high. Like it makes sense. I get it, but I don't know how to do it. Like I don't know how to implement it. Like strategically, it doesn't make sense. When all of a sudden somebody said, "Well, buy low and sell high," I'd buy something low, and it would never go up because I bought a crappy stock. They're like, Why'd you buy that?" Well, it was low. Like you told me to buy low,
Right.
and then all of a sudden I sell something and it's high. They're like, "Why'd you sell?" Because it's high. Like the system didn't work for me. It's not as simple as that. But when all of a sudden I get a little education, I get a little wisdom, I get a little knowledge, I understand a few things that I should be looking at, trends. It's like, oh, well, now I see what you were talking about. I can no longer unsee what I now see. I could look, but not understand, but now I see and I can't unsee. And so that's the same thing that we try to do with people as well as with as well as with
Youth.
athletes,
Yeah.
so that they can now have that. Because you're right, everybody's unique, everybody's different, and in a team setting, in a corporate setting, it's not trying to say everybody has to do the same thing, because everybody's in a different stage of their life, everybody has a different priority set. But what is your next step? What is your best next step, and how do we get there?
Yeah, it's great. It goes back to the original point you made about your father talking about the consistency and how
Mm-hmm.
important it is. And ultimately, whether it's investing in the stock and understanding it's consistently doing the right things, not just something that really does make a difference. We have to continue to build on the right things for ourselves, for our bodies. And it sounds like Own It and your plan are really helping businesses, teams, individuals really excel at figuring out how to start and then how to be coached as they go. I've done a couple of I interviewed a couple of people, one of which it was on the board at Whoop, and he was telling me that the future of wearables is in the coaching of actually identifying the data, because nobody knows how to utilize the data. And so super interesting to me, and I love what you're doing. The Power of Ownership comes out in April, I believe. Is that correct? So you can pre-order it right now on Amazon.
Yeah, April 23rd is when it drops. So if you go to the powerofownershipbook.com, so the powerofownershipbook.com, you can take a look, you can get access to it. A lot of what I talked about today is in there, and even more in depth, and helping you understand the data, helping you understand how to personalize habits, understand where you can get your next steps in, so that you can again take ownership of your health in a big way. But the other thing you'll also get in the pre-orders is you're going to get access to the video vault, you're going to get access to the content vault, you're going to get access to a bunch of frameworks and tools that you'll be able to use to again personalize your journey. I'm going to do about 3 or 4 free workshops for the people who pre-order, that'll again act as some of the coaching component to this, and give a little peek inside the door of what Own It actually is all about. So there's a lot of really cool things that we have with the pre-order. So it's thepowerofownershipbook.com.
Well, Justin, I'm grateful for having you on the show today. It's fun conversation, and I'm glad at 12 years old you became absolutely addicted and obsessed with learning, because it's paying off, and your expert status is helping a lot of people have a better life, and that's what we're all about here at the High Performance Life. So thanks so much for joining us.
I appreciate you, Scott. It's been fun.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.